Hi, welcome to Inside Out Leadership. I'm your host, Robb Holman. I'm on a mission to interview 12 of the greatest inside out leaders on the planet in 2021. These extraordinary leaders come from business, sports, politics, and entertainment who have faithfully demonstrated inspiration, humility, courage, perseverance, and servant leadership. As a result, they are leaving a ripple effect upon the world to affect future generations. Now, I got to share this with you. You could be anywhere right now, but you've chosen in this time, in this place, and in this space to be with me to learn principles, inside out leadership principles from the best leaders, the most effective leaders in the entire world. My guest today is none other than my friend. So I'm so excited. His name is Marcel Schwantes. He's the founder of Leadership from the Core. Now, a little bit about Marcel that you may not know. He's an international speaker, executive coach, and syndicated columnist, attracting over 1.5 million. You heard it right. 1.5 million readers monthly to his thought leadership. His work has been featured in Inc., Business Insider, Fast Company, the New York Daily Times, and Forbes, among others. He speaks passionately about the human side of business and how cultures of care, connection, and belonging power companies to thrive and outperform the competition. Hold tight. We'll be right back. Marcel, welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. How's it going?
Oh my goodness. We have so much to get to. So I'm going to dive right in. This is just selfishly, it's great to talk to you. Every time you and I get a chance to interact, whether it's through a social media message, email, phone call, some interaction, one way, shape, or form, I'm excited because I totally put my student hat on. Marcel's in the room. Marcel's on the phone. He's in the message channel. I have a lot to learn. So I'm readying myself.
Well, the same can be said about you, but the cool thing about it is that whenever we talk, I don't know if you feel it this way, but it feels like sparks fly. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. I'm like, what was that? It was another spark. And I got to say, I'm going to try and match your level of energy, but I don't think I can do it, but I'm going to try my best.
You'll do just fine, my friend. You'll do just fine. Listen, I thought an appropriate place to start. You have, and I say this, obviously, you know my heart, all sincerity, every fiber of my being. I don't know if I've met a more kind, gentle, heart-led leader than you. And it's fascinating to me. So I can't help but ask the question. I know our viewers, our listeners would love for you to answer this question. Being so human-centric, if we go back in the day, Marcel, of maybe a life milestone that shaped you to become more of that, like human-centric, where your heart truly beats for people within your sphere of influence and beyond, really. Is there one that comes to mind?
I have to take, let me take you back into Marcel's time machine. And we're going to flashback to 2005. And I was working for a healthcare organization inside a hospital, right? And it was one of the most toxic work environments I've ever experienced, to the point where the management in that particular hospital was so toxic that, the stress level reached a point where I one day stepped out of my and by the way, a little background is as I've had chronic back issues. So back then, the back issues were happening, but and because of the stress, I stepped out of my shower and I went straight down, bam, on the floor, going, my back is out. Anyway, my parents came to my rescue, took me to ER. The ER doctor says, "Hey, man, what's going on at work? Because this is kind of a stress related issue. Your body is just like flooding with toxins, with what's the cortisol, right? Cortisol and adrenaline and all those bad chemicals that your body produces during the flight or fight or freeze mode. It's just kind of rushing through your body, and you had this thing happen to you. So the doctor said, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your stress level at work right now? And I said, about a 25, doc.
Oh, geez.
And then it was indicative of what happens in the workplace, especially under toxic leadership, right? Is that it affects your health. And so I became one of the victims that I since then have talked about, written about, how being in that kind of environment really just wreaks havoc on your body, on your system, on your health, on your well-being. And so the cool thing is that after that job, I actually fulfilled my obligations there. It was a 2-year assignment, right? The next job was at another hospital, and I experienced the complete opposite of what I had experienced prior. And I didn't have the label for it, but my boss was a servant leader. And back then I hadn't even established my practice in teaching people how to be servant leaders. So, but my boss cared about me and other employees in a manner that I had never experienced before. I'm like, wait a minute, is this normal? I mean, do people do this
Sure.
in a business environment? He would spend an hour or two with me and just kind of pouring into me, and always made himself available, and he would set clear expectations and provide growth and learning for me. So I felt like I was always on the path to developing myself professionally and personally. And we had a great relationship. So that was the turning point, kind of the pivot, where I started to investigate what makes him such an outstanding boss. And that led me to figuring out that, oh, hey, there's this whole mountain of empirical evidence that is saying that when you take care of the people will take care of the business. And that's really good for your customers, your clients, et cetera. And it's really good for profit. So that's the business case for servant leadership. I probably just jumped the gun on you about 15 minutes from now, but
no, but you know what? It's beautiful what you're bringing up, and powerful, because so many people that I know, so many leaders, they have this distaste. They know what they don't want to be based on experience. But then they'll go and swing to the other side without having a positive experience or model. And that can even be somewhat dangerous. But what you're highlighting about your own life is you had a distaste. You knew what you didn't want, but you also experienced in and through a leader in your life that was a servant leader. You saw the positive effect. You saw the impact in your own life. And so tasting of something that wasn't so good, but then tasting of something that was so good, you saw that modeled, and you saw it modeled so well, Marcel, that then you could begin to reflect it that much more intentionally in your own life.
Right. So I replicated that by starting with me, because I went into management roles, soon after that. So now I had a point of reference for what kind of leader I wanted to be. Right. And by the way, his name was Bruce. I haven't seen Bruce in years. So shout out to Bruce. If
Bruce is listening, this is big time honor for sure.
Yeah. Bruce was that guy that, kind of give me that backdrop of this is not only the kind of leader I aspire to become, but I wanted to be able to then replicate that by teaching other leaders of a better way of, sort of a way to inspire your people to do great things together. And so, servant leadership is not a new thing by any stretch. I mean, you have to go back to the 1970s to Robert K. Greenleaf, who actually started the movement. But since then, I mean, when you put some of those great places to work companies that you see on Fortune magazine's list every year, I mean, when you start to look under the hood and see, well, what makes these people great, you'll start to notice a lot of servant leadership principles and habits at every level of the organization. So,
yeah, no, brilliant. So it probably wasn't, I don't know when you got married, how long you've been married. So here, Bruce had impacted your life, modeled so well about servant leadership. I'm sure, Marcel, you're not giving yourself enough credit. I will brag on you at least a little bit if you allow me to do this. I'm sure in just how you're wired, how you're knit together, there's just I know this, there's a presence about you. There's an empathy. There's a heart for other people. Some of that could just be your design, your personality, your bent, if you will. But then you have learned from people like Bruce, and then you started to be that much more intentional with it. How
Mm.
much has that affected the home front? I mean, you're married, you have an 8-year-old at home. So what is it like being a husband, servant leader that's a husband, a servant leader that's a dad? You got to take us into that at least a little bit.
Yeah. So point of reference here would be that, I'm informed by my faith, right? And so well, obviously it starts with the home first. And so I mentioned servant leadership and Bruce and how the reference there in the workplace was something that was just so counter to the toxic, like that I mentioned, the toxic work environment prior, right? But then as I started to investigate more and more about what does it mean to be a servant leader, it's all encompassing. It doesn't just happen in the workplace. If you call yourself a servant leader, and the bar is very high, Rob, you're going to have to transfer those skills to home and to your marriage, or to your spouse, and to your how you raise your kid, et cetera. So I'm really, I mean, when you talk about the whole sphere of servant leadership, I basically root that in my belief in Christ and how Christ led through his own servant leadership while he was here on earth. And so as a dad, what does that mean? I'm a servant leader to my son by helping him grow into the image of Christ, obviously first, and then helping them to grow as an individual, because I want to make sure that I set up my son for success in all areas of his life, and he's 8 now, so I'm setting him up for success at his school, making sure that he makes good choices and spending the time with them and pouring into his growth as an 8-year-old, and making sure that he has what he needs right now to succeed in his little community, in his little life. And then for my wife, servant leadership just means that you are modeling the marriage between Christ and the church, if you want to have a biblical frame of reference. And so for me, it's really a lot of sacrifice, and then also leading by pointing my wife to God as well. And then from there, it's basically making sure that I provide for her. I'm not just talking about financial provision, because ultimately I think that comes from above. But providing her in an emotional sense, being emotionally available for her, providing for her in a gifting sense, right? Making sure that I am showering her with gifts, and making sure that I'm speaking her love language, and not just trying to project my own love language on her. So to me, it's all encompassing, and and you have to start your servant leadership at home, and then hopefully that will then you can connect the dots to the workplace in your role as a manager or leader.
I love it, because I oftentimes will say that you take yourself with you wherever you go. And the more free that we are to be ourselves and serve others within our sphere of influence, when we're free and liberated to be who we were created to be, and love and lead and serve people out of that place, I'll tell you, it's not like you have to go over here and put on a different hat and pretend like you're someone who you were never created to be in the first place. You are who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is so dynamic. I asked you those family questions for a couple reasons, to certainly benefit the audience. Everyone is listening, but for selfish reasons, I want to learn how I could be a better leader of the home, a better dad, etc. So now I appreciate you answering and allowing me to enter into that space.
Yeah. And, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, if executives that are listening on the show, sometimes we don't know this, how much it impacts our children when we don't spend enough time with them. So in leading by serving, you create margin to make sure that your kids are not neglected. Because I know that there's people that will, they won't make the kids a priority, because 10, 12, 14 hours of work, you come home and you only have like a small window of maybe 2 hours of having dinner with the kids and saying goodnight, and or maybe helping with the homework. They need so much more than that to be nurtured, and for you to help guide them and pour into their development as a human being. So yeah, that takes sacrifice, and that may mean pulling you away from work related stuff, right?
Oh, don't
So
say that, Marcel. Don't say that. Pulled away from workplace stuff. No, you are hitting on something gigantic, because I want all the leaders, all the individuals listening right now to really highlight that, if not on a pen and pad of paper and stuff, but in your mind, in your heart, is people, even those closest to us, starting at the home, look at your team members. They need quality and quantity of time. So we've even heard people say over the years, Marcel, I'm sure you have as well, like, oh, well, it's just the quality of time. It's quality. I believe also it's the quantity. I believe it's both. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely both. There's time for me to instruct. Now I'm speaking to my child, right? Instruct, and there's just time for me to just spend time and have playtime.
Yeah.
And both are crucial for them to feel like, they actually my daddy really cares about me. I love my father. He's 84 now, but he didn't model that in his as he raised me. Because he was the classic workaholic, right? So I never got to see him. So our relationship was never that close growing up. And, and now we get along just fine. We talk once a week, et cetera. But he is starting to kind of see at the end of the line now how much he wishes that he had that time with me, that the one-on-one the daily one-on-one, and maybe taking me out to the ball game. Well, I never had those experiences. And I'm not saying that boo-hoo, Marcel, oh, it's like victim me. No, I'm just saying that there's an opportunity, if you're a young parent now, to not make the same mistakes that my dad did for me, because he does have a little bit of regret. And I think that the regret is more than I imagine. I think that he holds back on the regrets that he has for not being closer to me, for not, just pouring into me and mentoring me and teaching me the ways of manhood, etc. He probably won't say how much he regrets it, but I would wager that it's probably a big regret right now.
Yeah. Well, it's learning. Yeah. What I'm hearing you saying, that's learning from either the miscues, mistakes from others that have gone before us, so we can make it better. We can be that much more intentional and consistent moving forward, to be ultimately, at the end of the day, more present with those in our life. Here's a question I want to ask you. You're so insightful. So I want to go back a little bit. You made a comment pertaining to your wife that I want to pick up on. You said, I want to serve her in the way she needs to be served. That's important, because we're all familiar with the golden rule, Marcel. All of us, most people, I should say, maybe not all of us, most people, the golden rule: do to others what you would want done yourself. But then there's the platinum rule: do to others what they actually want to be done.
Right.
And when you said that you want to serve your wife in the way that she wants, longs, and needs to be served, as opposed to you projecting something on her, what you would want, what you would desire. Would you speak to that in the area of servant leadership? That what does it really mean to serve others in the way that they want, they need to be served, as opposed to what you think they need?
Yeah, sometimes servant leadership, there's the rule of unconditional love, Rob, and I can even speak to that in any sense, including a business sense. It's agape love, right? Okay. So you are focusing more on the needs of the people, of the person, and that, that, and it's funny, because as you pour into people and you meet their needs, and you care about them unconditionally, there's no strings attached. You're not expecting anything in return, right? So it's not a give and take. It's So I mean, what happens is that people will naturally respond back with things that are going to benefit you as well. And so, in a marriage sense, right, when I meet the needs of my wife, and she's very she longs for connection, and she longs for me to speak from the heart and be vulnerable, because to her that's what's going to build intimacy, and that's that's what's going to make her feel like, oh, we're close. No, I don't have the same need as she does, right? I don't have as much need for her to be vulnerable and connect with me and share your feelings with me, honey. And I don't have that. Okay. Mine is more of the, I need to have fun. I'm free spirited. Let's go out go for a hike type of thing. And that's how she would speak love into me. And she gets it now. So that comes from being married. I mean, for us, at least 13 years, we finally have figured out how to love each other unconditionally in the way that is going to fill us to the brim.
You mean you didn't get it year one, Marcel? What's going on with you two?
And it's funny because there's probably people listening that have been married 30 years and they're still trying to figure it out.
Sure. No, so true. Okay, so you talk a lot about your message is love. I mean, you have a podcast called the Love in Action Podcast. A huge part of servant leadership is learning how to love and love people well. But love to many people, it's too, I don't know, whooshy gushy. We're talking about the workplace here, Marcel. I don't want to talk about love. What would you say to leaders that I don't know if I want to enter into that space of love? I was always taught, I always saw it modeled that leaders should be strong. Forget that love stuff. Be strong and lead from the front and everything. What would you say as it relates to love and servant leadership to those leaders that may not be as accustomed to even using that word?
Yeah. And full credit where credit is due. Ken Blanchard came on the show and I asked him point blank, about servant leadership. And he goes, servant leadership is love in action. When Ken came on the show was not called Love in Action. I had another name that I even forgot already. But so light bulb went on, ding. And so I decided to rename and rebrand the show and call it Love in Action, which it really is informed by servant leadership. And so, yeah, you're right, Rob. The word love is people think that it doesn't belong in the business lexicon, right? Love, come on. What does that have to do with results and driving for success and meeting stakeholder expectations and bottom line results, all of those things? Well, what's happening is that people in this day and age, I think that the tide is turning. Whereas we came from 10, 15, 20 years ago, more of a top-down command and control style of leading and operating as a business. With these newer generations, right? So you got younger millennials, and now they're passing the baton or the torch to Generation Z, right? It's the new 20-somethings that are just coming out of college now. They have different expectations for how work should be, and just different expectations for how they want to experience work, right? Sure. And so a lot of it is now. A lot of leaders are catching on to the idea that we have to look to humanize the workplace. And so it's funny because now you start to connect the dots to servant leadership and how especially after COVID hit last year, March 2020, there was a complete shift in how leaders all of a sudden started to think more about the workers and checking in with them and asking them things like, how are you doing? And what do you need? And the mental health aspect and the employee well-being all of a sudden went up to the top, floated to the top, whereas before, people it wasn't even on leaders' radar screen, right? So now there's this big focus on giving employees flexibility and making sure that they have what they need to perform on all cylinders, basically. So much of that has to do with how they feel at work, their mental state, their emotional state. And there's a lot of aspects of love when you start to dig under the hood or, look under the hood. People are now starting to understand that when you care, and you can call it care if you want. There's, Bob Chapman doesn't call it love, right? He's the CEO of a $2 billion organization, Barry Waymiller. He calls it care. So whatever you want to label it, I just labeled it love and I mentioned earlier, in the agape love sense, which is sort of an unconditional. It's nothing romantic, nothing fuzzy, and not even familial love, like the kind of love that you have for your spouse or your child. Agape love says that I'm here to basically meet your needs and remove obstacles from your path so that you can succeed and help empower you, and making sure that you are running on all cylinders, because in business, that's what's going to take for you to motivate and inspire people to do good work. Right. And so now I am seeing more and more that we are inverting the pyramid from a top-down command and control to more of a bottom-up approach of empowering people. And I hope that it sticks, right? Because the shift happened when people started to suffer in the workplace, and with the pandemic. I mean, my goodness, all of a sudden it's like we're working from home and we're putting in 20 hours, and the kids are at home and the dogs are barking, and it's like things were in a state of flux and chaos. And leaders stepped up. If you remember, if you call yourself a leader, the ones that are servant leaders really stepped up to make sure that the employees were taken care of. Now, some have reverted back, as they have gone back to the office or hybrid environments, they've reverted back to their old ways of being. But those that hopefully there's a lesson here that because of the pandemic, minds have shifted around leadership, and that is that if you take care of the people first, they will take care of the business, and that's really good for business outcomes, for profit.
Could not agree more. Your message of servant leadership, leading from the core, this heart of love, care for team members, for people within your sphere of influence, starting in the home and working itself out, Marcel, has never been more timely. People have never been that much more receptive than they are right now. So I just say thank you for who you are. Thank you so much for what you bring to the table right now in this day and age. I really believe this. You're made for such a time as this, and your voice is getting louder. You're having more impact, more influence. If people are listening to you, I know they're picking up on so many different things, but perhaps you've forgotten some things that Marcel said earlier because you're so caught up in the moment right now. It's more caught than taught. Marcel teaches so much, right? There's so many practical things as it relates to servant leadership in general, that certainly you have picked up through this conversation. And you could certainly pick up as you read his articles that he puts out on a very consistent basis. But what supersedes all of that, in my opinion, is that Marcel burns with a fire of passion and enthusiasm for people and for life. And those that hear, those that watch, those that experience Marcel, can't help but catch on fire. So thank you for who you are. If people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
They can go to just marcelschwantes.com. If you type into Google Marcel Schwantes, you'll find me on Inc. And LinkedIn's a great place as well.
Great. Hey, any new project before we let you go here? Any new projects you're working on, or any interesting things that you want to get out there? At least whet our appetite here a little bit. Please.
Well, I appreciate you asking. The biggest one right now is because servant leadership. Some of the concepts of servant leadership are not common practice. It's common sense. You would think, yeah, leaders should be doing this. It's common sense, but it's really not common practice. So I have taken everything that I have taught and written about, and created an online course called From Boss to Leader. And you can find that on my website.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you. You're such a gift to me, to the world. And I look forward to continue to learn from you, as I oftentimes do. But thanks for being a friend too, and always being in my corner with all the things I have going on. And thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, the feeling is quite mutual, Rob. Thank you.
You bet. Well, listen, I want to say thank you to each and all that have listened today, have tuned in. As I said earlier, you could be at any place at any time, but you've chosen in the here and now to say yes to Inside Out Leadership and our special guest, Marcel Schwantes. So I also want to give a special thanks to Auto Conversion. Auto Conversion has been a special friend, also been in my corner since 2017. If you are a content producer looking to maintain, mature your own PR and media strategy, Auto Conversion can help you in the same way they've helped me. You just go to autoconversion.net and see how you can become a premium member today. In addition to that, I want to encourage you, if you are an aspiring professional speaker or seasoned professional speaker, that you've been out there on the circuit doing keynotes, opening, closing, but you want to get paid what you're worth to speak? Isn't that the million-dollar question so many aspiring and seasoned speakers alike have asked and are asking? If that's you, I want to encourage you. Go to robbholman.com/GPS. I have a Get Paid to Speak bootcamp. It's my world-class speaker community where we gather one time for 2 hours a month over a webinar, highly interactive, to learn from my over 20 years as a professional keynote speaker, to help you get paid what you're worth to speak. Join now by going to robbholman.com/GPS. Until next time, my name's Robb Holman for Marcel Schwantes. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.